Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 313th edition of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. It is draft eve. It is the night before what is kind of like a holiday for some people in the NFL, where they get to unwrap the presents, which are the new player or players that they get to welcome to their franchise. And there's nobody I would rather be spending draft eve. I've got like a cat here that's driving me nuts, like on my face or something. Sorry. Anyway, that is not the point. There's nobody I'd rather spend draft eve with than the one, the only Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. This guy has been working like a dog. He's been dealing, having family time, all sorts of things going on, but he's carved out some time tonight for us. And folks, Jeff is going to be off doing actual draft work the next couple days, so he will not be part of the live stream. Jeff, what will you be doing during the draft the next couple days?
One of the gambling companies in Canada has me helping with a lot of just live projections, live odds, tracking things, tracking rumors, keeping up on Twitter. So I do a lot of behind the scenes work. I spend a lot of time involved with draft gambling. It's one of those things that I track for months, and I really got into it once COVID hit, and it was that first. There was nothing to do. That I remember in March of that year, and I was playing with stocks, and got into draft betting, and so I've gotten just I'm really good at tracking different sites, different odds, and so one of the companies has me just working for them the night of the draft, helping set up things for day two, and kind of walking them through what options are. And so it's a really cool gig, but man, it sucks. Like I had so much fun on our shows a couple years ago, and then last year me and you did day three. So knowing what you have in store for tomorrow, it's bittersweet. It's a little bittersweet. We spend so much time on this draft, and it's a tough thing for me.
I think it's pretty sweet. I think it's pretty sweet. They're lucky to have you, and we might get you day three, right? We might get you a little bit for day three.
I am free day three. Day three is wide open for me. So
Yeah, so we'll
we have
we'll,
the
we'll
second pick of day three, assuming they don't trade it before then. So
That's right. That's right. Day three could be very interesting. So
yeah,
Jeff, I have not done the betting thing. I've actually generally stayed away from sports betting and betting in general because I bet too much money and it takes away from the experience for me a little bit. But anyway, what is the biggest bet you've made? Like not money wise, but what's the one that the biggest win you've had as a draft bet over the years?
so the one thing about betting the draft, I'm like you. I don't like betting games because there's so much variables, and Vegas has inside information in terms of like people getting injured, and the spreads are so good. So I don't really dive into that much. I throw like a couple dollars in the season, but the draft is one of the most the books have no idea how to handicap it because no one has information. So people always look at like what the odds are, and a lot of it's based on like Peter King's mock draft the week of the draft, like used to shift the odds like crazy, even though Peter King would write in like the top of his article, like, I know nothing. And so a couple years ago, when I really got into it, there were crazy odds on the Texans to draft Derek Stingley. And like it was like plus 2,600 or something, which is like 26 to 1. And I remember looking at the time, and that was the year the Seahawks made the Russell Wilson trade, and Derek Stingley was a guy I remember I really, really liked. I remember thinking at the time, like the Texans are shit, like they're going nowhere. Like Stingley had that like crazy upside, but got hurt. I'm like, maybe they'll take that guy. So I put like $25 on it, thinking like, all right, whatever. And they drafted him. I won $2,000 on that bet.
Holy moly!
And a couple years ago, they were really bad with like over unders on players. So there was a guy from Canada named Neville Gallimore who was drafted by the Cowboys in the third round. And they had his over under 30 and a half, meaning he had to go in the first round. And I remember that year, that was the year COVID hit, and I was not working. I was just basically following the draft that year. There was nothing going on. I remember writing Jim Nagy and being like, Jim, like, where's this guy gonna go? He's like, he's probably a late second round pick. So me and my brother tried to put like a ton of money. We were just sitting at home at that time, and the sites actually cut us off. They wouldn't let us bet because, and then the next day they changed the line. So like a big bet on the draft. So he ended up going like 69. So them betting 30.5 was one of the worst lines I've ever seen. So the draft's the only thing I like betting on because I'll say this, they've gotten way better this year. Like the books have figured it out. I think people have really taken advantage because the last 2 years they were like last year you could get Bryce Young going first, like really late in the process for good odds. And it was like pretty obvious by the end. So they were really bad. They still thought CJ Stroud would go. I'll say they've gotten better. So my money making potential, I think, is way down. And
Do you have a favorite bet that you've made in this year's draft?
one of the ones I made a couple weeks ago that I hoping will hit before the Panthers. I can't remember what they did, but there was odds like their first pick of the draft to be a receiver was really high. It was like plus 200. And like if you're looking at their team and like they're in a sweet spot for receivers. So I really like that bet. I think they're definitely going to draft a receiver. There was a really good odds on the Bills to draft a receiver before they traded Stephon Diggs. Once they traded Stephon Diggs, so that was another one I really liked. I got it before the trade because I knew Gabe Davis had signed somewhere else, and they were really slow last year by the end of the year. So once they made the trade, the odds completely flipped.
Is that for the first round or any
For the
time?
first round? First
Okay.
round. What all the sites will do now is they'll give odds on what every position will be drafted by the team in the first round. So the Seahawks, the big favorite is offensive line. The second best odds are on them drafting defensive line or edge. But there's a huge gap in the odds. If you think they're going to draft a defensive lineman, like there's odds like plus 170 out there. So you can make 1.7 times your bet if you think the Seahawks are not going to draft an offensive line in the first round. Brian, you've showed the numbers on that more than anyone. So if you're thinking the Seahawks are going to go elsewhere and you do like to dive into this, and again, I don't want to tell people to go gamble their money away, but if you don't think the Seahawks are going to draft the offensive line and you want to get involved in draft gambling, that's a really good bet. You can look at different positions if you think they're going to go DeJean, if they're going to go anywhere else.
I mean, I told you the last time I placed a bet related to the Seahawks might have been 2002. I can't remember what it was. It was a game in Arizona. Matt Hasselbeck's quarterback. Sean Alexander was a running back. And I put it was either like even odds or the Seahawks maybe like by just a few points. And I was like, the Seahawks are absolutely going to win. I put $500 on the game. I was like, this is easy money. And that was the game, if you remember, that the Seahawks were ahead at the end and Matt Hasselbeck handed off to Sean Alexander and they fumbled trying to run down the clock.
I do remember that.
Arizona picks up the ball and they end up kicking a field goal and win or something like that. And I was like, this is the most sure bet I'll ever make. And I'm like, I'm done. It made it so much worse for me.
I feel your pain. I don't bet on games for that reason. There's just too many variables for me. And I don't think I've ever bet on a Seahawks game.
Yeah.
I'm just too emotionally invested.
Yeah. That's part of, I don't even do fantasy at this point. It's been many, many years since I've done fantasy either. But what? So it sounds like there's a mock draft that came out from, I think, at least one of the best draft nicks out there, former personnel guy, Daniel Jeremiah, who's, I think draft content's been great. I do question when it comes into predicting that people misunderstand. There's a difference between being a scout and understanding which players are better or have potential matches and then predicting where they're going to go and draft strategy. They're just different things. And I don't know that Jeremiah is great at the latter, but I think he's very good at the former and certainly was paid by the league to do the former. So he came out with his final mock today, and he had Terrion Arnold, cornerback, going to the Seahawks at 16. How much money? What's the odds? Do you have that somewhere, Jeff? You could look up to tell us what the odds are of if you bet Terry and Arnold to the Seahawks, what you could get in a return.
Give me a second here.
Yeah. I would bet it's pretty long odds. And I don't even know if they have individual players giving you chances or if it's just positional when you get out of the top 10.
So it's out of the top 10, it's just positional for teams.
Yeah.
14-1.
Could make some decent cash if someone wants to drop a few bucks. And again, no one's suggesting anyone gambles, but that was a wild pick. What do you think? I mean, what do you think about? I mean, one, Terry and Arnold, and two, the fit at 16. If the Seahawks did something like that,
oh, I'd absolutely crush them. I would absolutely crush. And the funny thing is, I really like Terry Arnold. He's as safe and steady as maybe any player in that range. But I looked at the mock draft when you told me about it, and in that mock draft, Jeremiah had them passing on Jared Verse, Byron Murphy, Barden, and there was one more. It wasn't Fautanu. It might have been Fuaga. So let's just throw out the offensive line. If they passed on Byron Murphy and Jared Verse and a trade down and took Terry and Arnold, it would be like that's close to like an F grade. And again, I really like Terry and Arnold. He's a really steady player. Nick Saban, big fan of his, but they like ran a lot of zone coverage last year at Alabama. They played way less man coverage, which means they might not have the same kind of trust they would have. But it's just they've spent the 5th overall pick last year on a cornerback. I know he's a little unique. He's a chess piece. And to go come back again with all of their needs and to bypass all of that trench talent to take a cornerback, it would be like obviously Diaz didn't turn out, but I think it would be similar to the Diaz Creed Humphrey. Obviously, I think Arnold's has a far better chance of hitting, but in terms of philosophy, and I would really struggle with it. I think there's just unless they had him as like a top 3 player on the board. Even so, I would if they didn't trade down and just took him there, I would be devastated.
yeah, you and I have talked about this, that I think cornerback has the potential to be a sneaky need for the Seahawks in that Trey Brown's in the last year of his deal. I think you probably hope you can re-sign him and they can be part of a young core for a while. But who knows? He might price himself out. You've got Michael Jackson on the last year of his deal. Don't know what's going to happen there. And then you've got Devin Witherspoon and Reek Woolen. And if you're looking for that third corner, and if you know that Witherspoon can play inside, you might need an outside corner here. But yeah, I think that would be a for a team that I mean, you and I talk about creating strengths. And so I love the concept of just building a strength, but I think they've already got a strength in corner. And it's interesting if you look at some of the league rankings, people don't have the respect for that cornerback room the way I think maybe you and I do. I think most people would not know Trey Brown. Like most people wouldn't say much about him. They certainly wouldn't say anything about Michael Jackson. And I think people think about Reek Woolen taking a little bit of a step back last year. So I think that room is already as close to a strength as the Seahawks have. I think it's right there with, it's not quite the wide receiver room. It's not quite the running back room, but it's the strongest group on the defense for sure. So that doesn't feel like a real solution to any of their problems, but probably not worth even talking about that much more, but certainly got my attention there.
So while you were talking, I just pulled up Jeremiah's mock draft from 2023, right before the draft. The Seahawks, he had them taking Jalen Carter at 5 and Anthony Richardson at 20. Now, they certainly would have taken Anthony Richardson at 20, but from what we've been reported on, obviously he had his range completely wrong, but you've talked to Brady Henderson several times. I think it's been pretty clear that Jalen Carter was not a consideration for them at 5. So
yeah,
I think it's pretty clear that Daniel knows the players really well, but to know these teams, every one of them inside and out, I think it's next to an impossible task.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I want to know, you've been obsessing about this draft. We've done a jillion mock drafts. We'll probably do another one tonight. We'll kick Evan. Maybe we'll keep Evan on. Maybe we'll kick Sean out. Let him go. What are you expecting to happen? You've got. Did you get a chance to update your mock draft today? I know you've been busy. I know you said you were going to.
No, I'm actually planning to do that tomorrow to kill some
Okay.
time. But
So
yeah.
What's your current perspective on the Seahawks? What are you thinking they're going to do?
If I had to pick, I would just guess they're going to trade down, and they're probably going to pick someone in their early 20s. The more I get closer to this draft, I'm getting more queasy about the idea of passing on Jared Verse. The more I think about this, and Brian, you were the one who pointed out this article to me, but reading Mike McDonald's article that John Boyle did and some of those quotes and just talking about how much he values the trenches and just knocking the guy and beating the guy in front of you. Like the coaching staff, every time I hear Mike McDonald talk or I see a quote, I become far more encouraged about the coaching side. On the other end of the spectrum, every time I hear John Schneider talk, I become a little more nervous about the personnel side. And that's where this draft is eating at my brain, because this is really, it seems like a personnel side. They got the traditional model where the GM picks the players and the coaches coach. This was much more of a partnership, I think, in the past. I think now we've seen so many indications of it. This is John Schneider's, and it makes me nervous. But for what I'm hoping, for me, there's 3 or 4 guys that if they're on the board at 16, it's Byron Murphy, who seems way less likely. I think he's the favorite to go number 9 now. If he's there, you have to pick him. I don't care what the trade is. For me, it's Jared Verse, Fuaga, or Fautanu. If any of those guys are there at 16, I want them to turn in the card. But if I had to guess the most realistic situation, I'd probably guess they trade maybe with Philadelphia or maybe with Green Bay. And I'm going to have to get used to the idea they might pass on these guys. But man, seeing those Jared Verse things from Albert Breer, where he made the same comparison as you, and you think about winning in the trenches and powerful, Jared Verse. And then I've read some of Bob McGinn. I don't know if you've had any chance to see any of those quotes. Bob McGinn talks to scouts. The way they describe Jared Verse, man, it's just like, he is my kind of player. Like, he's like the alpha. He's the loudest guy in the field. He's the guy he's a bully. And this team just lacks it. And obviously Byron Murphy would be, I think I would have him over Verse still, as much as I do like Verse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, I've been taking in all kinds of content, and I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but Daniel Jeremiah and Tom Pelissero did a Twitter Spaces with Devin Witherspoon.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked Devin Witherspoon who he wanted the Seahawks to draft, and they said you couldn't say his teammate at Illinois, Newton, and he said Byron Murphy. And he also was very high on Penix, which was interesting given the team situation. But I think, like, for me, the more I think you've said this multiple times on Hawkblogger Morning. It's just the more we get closer, we realize that Byron Murphy's probably a pipe dream at 16. But man, I'm gonna be queasy if they pass up Jared Verse. I can feel it already. I can feel that pain in my stomach. The more we get closer to the draft, I'm just becoming more like piled towards him.
I want to do some patron questions. We'll take some now, and then we'll do some maybe a little bit later. But because I think we have 19 of them tonight, we're not going to probably get through all of them. But I was thinking about this, Jeff. We saw from Jason at Over the Cap. He shared about teams' return on investment, and we're both, I think, pretty sure he was talking about first round picks in general from like 2011 to 2019, something like that. And the Seahawks were one of the worst, and that's not a surprise. But I think there's 2 first rounds. There's the first half of the first round, and there's the last half of the first round. And when the Seahawks have been in the last half of the first round, they have done awful. They've done really poorly. And they've won a lot, so they've been in the last half a lot. But when they've been in the top half of the first round, they've done pretty well. I mean, Bruce Irvin or Charles Cross might be your worst picks in the top half of the first round, and those aren't awful. Those aren't like embarrassingly. And if you look at even the players available when Charles Cross was picked, they still probably did pretty well for themselves. But this would be the first time, Jeff. We've never seen John Schneider trade out of the first half of the first round and into the back half. And knowing how few players most teams have first round grades on, I wonder if that changes the math here and the likelihood that they trade back. If they really only have 15 to 20 first round grades, I don't know if they're really looking to trade back into the mid 20s. I wonder if that is just a much more, because of what they've done in the 20s. John Schneider said it himself. The picks in the late 20s, they generally don't have first round grades on the guys, so they feel like they might as well trade back, get more picks, and still get second round graded players. At 16, I don't think that's going to be true. So they'd have to trade out of, quote, their first rounders. I don't know if John's going to do that.
Well, that might be the most encouraging thing I've heard in the last week or so, because it's a good point. Thinking about a lot of his draft press conferences over the years and post-draft press conferences, he's really talked about the gap between the first half of the first round and the second half of it. And something I've always heard from personnel people is that all first rounders are not equal. That was a big part of the Rams attack, that those late first round picks, the odds of hitting them. And you look at like the year the Seahawks took Rashad Penny, like they traded away from a spot where Jair Alexander went. And then if you look at like the next 10 picks, there's a lot of misses there and right around them. And there's been a lot of years where you look around who's been picked, the Fetty year and all these kinds of things. And that's where my thinking has changed. And I agree with you completely. And I'm hoping John comes to the same realization. And we've seen the biggest mistakes they've made is when they've gone a little too cute. And that 2017 draft sticks in the back of our heads because the look of the players they passed on, there's tons of all pros. And in this draft, what makes their thing unique is because of all those quarterbacks, receivers, and tackles, they're going to be looking at top defensive players in this draft, or potentially if an offensive lineman falls to them, someone right in the sweet spot. So if they do have that significant gap in their grading, I think you're right. I think that's a really good perspective that I really haven't heard. And I think 22 might be the cutoff of where they would trade down to at that point. And Philly has the 2 second rounders. They're apparently after one of the corners, and that might be the swap. And Chop Robinson, Cooper DeJean, those are the names we've heard tied to Seattle. I still don't love it. I'd still rather one of those top 16 guys, but I think going through these scenarios, getting into the mid 20s is the worst case scenario for me, even if you get a second round pick. I think for me, it's you pick at 16 or you do those Washington trade and get out and draft volume completely.
Yeah. All right, let's take a couple of these Patreon questions. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. You can sign up and ask us questions each week, just like these folks are doing, and give the show a like and click subscribe. We're closing in on 10,000 subscribers. Thanks for everyone who's already done that. Michael Mathis, no surprise, one of our most generous and active supporters, asks, what is your guys' opinion of Mike McDonald erasing history by melting down Pete Carroll's one Lombardi trophy and forming it into an ashtray for his office? If Evan were on tonight, I would have said, quote, forming it into a plate to eat Whataburger on. Thank you for the rhetorical question, Michael. I appreciate it. I think Jeff, I won't tell you what Jeff put in our group chat about those stories. He was not a fan of spending any time discussing those topics. Let's keep going. Jordan Farrell says, tomorrow night, Seattle's on the clock at 16 with Fautanu, Verse, Fuaga, and Penix still available. Who do you think Schneider is picking in that scenario? I've got a sneaky feeling it will still be Penix.
That would be wild. There's a lot of buzz about that in the league right now. I don't know if it's a smokescreen or not, but what do you think, Brian, on this one?
I don't think that they're in on Penix. Had Brady on Henderson on this morning, and he seemed to have the impression that they liked but don't love Penix and
Oh,
on the personnel side. So I don't know. Rob Rang thinks it's an ideal pick. We'll see. If Fuaga's there, I think they go Fuaga.
nice.
But it's hard to say. I think he's the guy that I think there's a lot of Upati comparisons going on there that maybe are a little bit lazy, but I just think he's a guy that's particularly interesting for what Seattle's trying to do.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts there?
Oh, Fuaga's one of my favorite guys in the draft. He's just an ass kicker, and he is so physical. And I hope he can play guard. I know he can play right tackle, but his physicality and his potential dominance is just something they haven't had in the offensive line for so long. Upati, they had him at the end, but like peak Upati with San Francisco was such an awesome player. We had it with Breno, but Breno was a physically limited guy. It was not. Fuaga has that like Breno level of toughness with Tristan Wirf's body, and he is a fun player. And just watching Seattle get pushed around for so long, this is like the anti guy for this. So I would be very ecstatic if that was the pick.
Derek Woods asks, rate your level of excitement on the following potential picks, as in which gets you the most excited to least excited. I don't think we're going to go through all of them, Derek. It's a bold question, but tell me which of these picks you like the best, Jeff. Byron Murphy at 16, Troy Fautanu at 16, trade back and pick Barton in the 20s, Junior Colson at 81, Tavondre Sweat at 81, Zach Zinter in the 4th round, Theo Johnson in the 4th round, Tip Ryman in the 6th round, or a kicker on day 3.
Well, I covered it before. I think Byron Murphy for me is the sweet spot, but I'm really with you on this. I'm really aligned with you on this one. I think the pick that would just get my blood like most fired up, Tavondre Sweat. I know there's a red flag there. It's serious. He's a limited player, but there's just something about him. He's a one of one kind of guy. I know you've talked about him more than anyone, but just the way Seattle's been and the way they've just been getting killed in the trenches, it's such an emphasis for me on this team getting fun to watch again. I hated watching this defense by the end of last year. It was Evan called it a chore a lot, which was annoying at first, but he proved to be right in the end. And I think Tavondre Sweat can really change their total look on defense. And I think if you can get him in the 3rd round, I think that pick would just get me like a fist pump out of me or like a JSN level yell that I did last year. Like Murphy, I'd be happy. I wouldn't. I don't think I would jump up and like scream like an animal, but like I think Sweat at that spot would probably prompt some crazy reaction out of me.
Yeah, for me, if it said Sweat at 102, then you get my reaction. And I mentioned this on Twitter. People are like, oh, there's no way he'll last till day 3. There's a lot. I mean, I think the majority of mocks I'm seeing right now have him going in the 4th round. And, he's got significant questions. As much as I'm excited about Tavondre Sweat, there's a question about how much this guy loves playing the game. He's hasn't been able to keep his weight down. Might have a drinking problem. Don't know. He certainly has a judgment problem. He doesn't stay on the field because of his fitness. Like there's a lot of downsides, and there's not a lot of teams that actually want to play 365 to 380 pound players. So his value already is kind of questionable. I don't think it's crazy at all that he goes on day 3. And if that's the case, the Seahawks are in the driver's seat because Carolina's got the first pick in the 4th round on day 3. And then Seahawks have the second pick. And I don't think Carolina is a team that is a reasonable fit for a 370 pound player. So I think that's the pick for me that would be specifically 102. I get most excited about, but yeah, of these that were listed here, trading back and picking Graham Barton in the 20s would be the thing that I get the most excited about because I don't know if that's even realistic. I really think Barton's going to go earlier than that. And every time I've run through these sequences, trading back and getting Barton first just sets up the whole draft. You can go defensive tackle, you can go safety, you can go linebacker. If you get a guy like Barton, who for me, I think is maybe the safest guard selection you can make in the first round. Maybe not quite the same upside as like the Fuaga and Fautanu, but there you're basically stealing from a tackle value to play at guard. Barton is meant to play guard or center. Like he is built for it. And so if you could do that, if you could guarantee that, then I think everything else snaps into place. So that's the one for me strategically I would be the most excited about. Well, this is remarkable, Jeff. I didn't think this was going to happen.
Uh-oh.
It's been a very long time. There's been these like millennial pickleball games going on, and we didn't think this guy would ever make it on time for this show. But he's back. Evan Hill is back on the show after a long hiatus. And Evan, first of all, dude, it's great to see you. I'm going to be asking you a lot of detailed questions about every prospect in the draft, and I just want to make sure you're ready for that. How you feeling, man?
I am so ready. I have done deep, extensive pre-draft research, but seriously, I've been catching up on your guys' daily shows. You guys have been pumping out content recently. I've been learning from you guys. It's crazy. This is I can't believe this is the night of what do we call this? Pre-draft Eve? Yeah.
Draft Eve.
Draft Eve. It's fun. I'm excited.
Well, I'm so glad to see you back. I'm also glad that we're going to get you at least for some of the live show tomorrow. That'll be fun. We'll hang out. Can't wait to see your reactions and to players that you've never heard of before. That is fun every year. And we joke, but Evan ends up being right about all sorts of things he has no business being right about. And that's part of his charm. So I'm looking forward to that, dude.
It's true. I listened to last year's show, like at some point last summer, and Evan would not stop talking about how they got bullied on defense the year before, and like it was embarrassing they didn't draft someone on defense that can stop the run. And then you watch the team play last year at the end.
I mean, here's the thing. I have like great respect for draft guys like you because like I genuinely don't understand how you guys like evaluate and study like what is it, several hundred, maybe 1,000. I mean, I guess if you consider UDFAs and stuff, but like there's just so many guys to evaluate, and it just I'm saying the obvious out loud, but to do that every single year, that's like a whole different level of energy that I respect. I don't possess that. So,
or you can argue we're sick in the head. One of the two.
It is both. And if they were like evaluating fast food burgers, I know that you'd have the energy for that. So it just depends on what we're talking about. Evan, we got a buddy of yours, a buddy of the shows in general, but a buddy of yours sitting here waiting to come on stage. And I wanted to give you the chance to do an intro because I'll certainly be asking him some questions about you in a little bit. So this is a chance for you to bring this man on stage.
I love this. Can he hear me in the background?
Because he can hear you. He can't say anything though. He's silenced.
I've been waiting for this moment for years. Well, can I just tell you something? This man's wife almost murdered me. Like, rewind 4 to 5 years ago, I made a bet, a one-sided bet with Sean Clement, and he asked me to wish upon him in 2018. He's telling me he asked me to wish success upon his favorite hockey team. I think it was like the Washington something, not like DC, whatever their team I think is.
The Capitals.
I think it's the Capitals.
No, I'm Canadian. I know hockey.
Yeah. And I told Sean 6 years ago, I was like, here's the deal, brother. Your team at the beginning of the season is going to win the Stanley Bazooka, whatever thing they call it, okay, at the end of the season. And he was like, Evan, if that happens, I will send you $500 in In-N-Out gift cards, okay? Fast forward to the end of the season, they win. Okay. And I receive in my mailbox like 6 months later, 5 $100 gift cards to In-N-Out because In-N-Out actually caps it at $100. So that was kind of like the birth of our friendship over time. We've connected in various cities across across the United States just for drinks and talking football and stuff like that. But he's gone on to have like a really, really cool career. He is, if I get this right, the VP of football analytics for Sumer Sports. So they do a ton of like roster construction work with NFL teams all across the league. They've gained like a massive sort of traction among the league, and they're really well respected. And Sean's got like a crazy large team underneath him with really smart people. And I have no idea why he talks or hangs out with me. So that's kind of the context. Sean, welcome to the show. How was that intro?
No, that was good. I'm surprised. I'm always surprised at the breadth of your hockey knowledge, Evan.
What, did I get the team right?
Kind of, yeah.
Which team? Which is your team?
It was the Washington Capitals. This was in the pre-Kraken days. The Kraken were still just a glint in all of our collective eye at this point.
And you know what's crazy is I actually probably jumped a step, Sean. Weren't you back in the day like field goals contributor? Like,
oh yeah, I started out. Yeah, I started out writing about like special teams on field goals. Just punting analytics that absolutely no one wanted to read, but it was kind of my way of like, well, nobody else is writing about this. I'll write about it, and that'll get people's attention, and some of it did.
That was like OG squad under Danny Kelly, like back in the day. For those of you who are like really intense Seahawks fans, that was like
golden
special
era.
Time. Yeah,
golden era.
Yeah.
And Sean, the first time you and I've gotten to chat live, you went on from punt analytics. Did you work for some NFL teams? Am I remembering that right? Did you?
I went on to be a consultant with the Ravens for a couple of years. So I was still active duty military at the time, so I couldn't just quit my day job and go work football, unfortunately. But I was doing some consultant work with the Ravens for a couple of years while I was living out in California, and then spent a year with Miami Dolphins doing some consulting work with them. About 2 years ago, got a call from the founder of Sumer Sports asking like, hey, do you want to help me stand up this company? Like, bring you on as a consultant, build the team, help build out the product. And once I retired from the Army, I moved into a full-time role with the company and haven't looked back. So it's great to be able to work in football and talk ball every day. It's a blessing.
How did the Ravens gig? Where did that get started? Like what of your work caught their attention? Or were you applying for something? Like how did that happen?
No, well, it's funny. I kind of reached out to them at the same time they reached out to me. So, good friend of mine, Josh Hermsmeyer, who used to write for 538, he was good friends with Corey Krawick, who's now like the director of analytics for the Los Angeles Chargers. And basically Corey was looking for people to help out on the analytics staff there at the Ravens, and Josh was like, oh, you should reach out to Sean. Like he's good. But of course, like Corey and some of the other folks at the Ravens, their first question was like, do you only care about punting, or like, do you want to work on other stuff too? And I was like, no, I only worked on punting because like nobody else was. And they're like, okay, we just want to make sure if we gave you some non-special team stuff that like you actually do it. But yeah, it was just right place, right time.
What was that like? I mean, the NFL, for people that have not had any interaction with NFL franchises or the NFL as a company, like the Shield itself,
yeah,
it is kind of caught in a time warp where like very conservative, very stuck in their ways. Technology adoption is slow. Things that that could make money, they're very careful about. The brand is a big deal. And so analytics being this very fast moving evolution that was going on in sports in general, mainly baseball was the biggest place that was happening, but really was slower to kind of take hold in NFL groups. And a lot of coaches actively disliked data. They were like,
Yeah.
I don't need numbers. I don't need some geek to tell me how to coach a football game or who's good or what's the right move. I'm the coach. I'll figure that out.
Right.
So once you got in and you were doing some of that work, how much traction did insights that you found take? Was it easy? Was it like, did you have to like really sell it? How did that work?
No, I mean, I would say it depends a lot on what coaching staff you're talking to. I think the Ravens, especially, in that 2019 timeframe, were they were kind of going through a rebuild, right? And they had drafted Lamar Jackson and really staked their future on him. But they were open to any edge that they could find. And I think that that's really the big key to it, right? Is like there has to be an openness. And, if you're going to say that, like, oh, we'll take any advantage we can to win a game, like, well, it doesn't matter if it's a 0.5% more efficient or a 0.5% better, like we'll take it. Like that kind of intellectual openness is all you need. And so, that really appealed to me because I just like I love winning. I'm a hyper competitive person, and I was like, yep. If I got to work 100 hours a week, if that means we squeak out an extra win and make it to divisional round or whatever it is, like hell yeah, I'm on board. My wife was finally happy. I finally was getting paid by a team because all I was doing was football analytics all day and night anyway. And she's like, well, at least now you're getting paid.
Yeah. Yes. All right. I got one more and then I got to let the guys get in here. I need you, Sean, who as an expert in data and analytics and football, to tell me what is the number one piece of data you could use to tell me why Jason Myers is not worth the contract that the Seahawks pay him.
I would have to look up his contract.
He's super underpaid on the team.
Yeah, let's see. I
want to watch this. Let's watch this happen in real time. Let's watch his eyes roll to the back of his head.
Oh my God, $5 million? Really?
Yes, that is the appropriate reaction.
Agreed. It's really undervalued for what he does.
Keep going, Sean. Keep going.
So, kickers are funny when it comes to analytics. I will say, because like they're really difficult to build anything coming out of the draft. And so like you talk to analytics people, they're just like, just don't spend a pick on a kicker. Like, don't do it. I will say, I do think the Seahawks got their kicker the right way, which is let somebody else waste the draft pick on the guy, stay in the league long enough to see if he's actually any good, and then pay him. I would much rather do that than burn a draft pick on a kicker.
Sean, you're going the wrong direction. That's not the
I'm
question
sorry.
I asked you.
But like, if it's me and I'm running a team, I won't even burn a 7th rounder on a kicker. Absolutely not. Like I'm going to find the Young Wei Koos of the league. I'm going to find a Jason Myers and pay them. Now I will say,
clip that
$5 to $6 million. That's a little steep. I don't know about that for a kicker in his mid-30s. That's a little rich.
We could have just stayed there, but I got to admit that was a disappointing answer, Sean. I had high hopes, but I'll let the other guys get in here. Evan, did you have something?
Sean, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but do you have did you work at all with Mike McDonald at all in Baltimore? Did you have any overlap or interaction with him? Anything you can share, at least maybe perception-wise?
I had absolutely no interaction with him whatsoever, unfortunately.
So tell us deeply what you think about him.
All I can really say about Coach McDonald is that people that I did work with really closely and have tremendous amount of respect for think he's incredibly smart. One of the things, like his number one trait that I've heard from, former coworkers at the Ravens who I have a lot of esteem for, say that like he's one of those guys that's just really quick on his feet and is extremely adaptable. And so I think that is part of the key to his success running defenses, both at Michigan and then with the Ravens, is that like he is not one of those guys that when you draft a player that he's trying to like force a player to play a certain way. he is going to maximize the talent of that player, and he's going to ensemble together all the talent that he has in a way to be, the most effective you can for a team. And I just think that is a great trait to have.
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question, so I'll kind of spin this around a little differently. Evan mentioned before you were working with teams on roster construction, and analytics. And then you look at the Seahawks, who on the coaching side seem really encouraging. On the personnel side, a lot of questions. I know Ben Baldwin's been very critical of them over the years. What is your opinion on what John Schneider has done over the last few years and some of the areas they can get better at in terms of roster construction?
Yeah, the Seahawks are in kind of a awkward spot where they're not they're not bad enough where you're going to get a top pick, but they're not good enough to really compete at this point. And that makes things like really hard. And also one of the tough things is how many blue chip players are on the Seahawks at this point? 4, maybe.
That's generous.
Yeah, Metcalf, Witherspoon, maybe Jenkins, and then Lockett. That's probably it for blue chip players. And Lockett's getting up there in age, so how much longer can you rely on him to be kind of a cornerstone of your offense? I will say that I do think the Seahawks right now have a really good middle class of players, and so that they're not set up where they have just people starting who have no business starting, which you do find with some teams kind of in that much worse situation. So I don't know. I think the Seahawks are one good draft away from being a pretty good playoff team because they have a good foundation. But this draft is going to be really important, moving forward. I do also wonder, and there's just no way to know what the answer to this is really. It's what is the long-term plan at quarterback and when are they going to strike? I like Geno, and I think Geno is really effective, but he's getting up there in age, and they have obviously they've committed to him, but not really committed to him long term. So they're keeping their options open there. I wonder if they're kicking the tires on some stuff this draft. Sitting there at 16, but you have so many other teams that are interested too, like the Vikings, who are, pretty vocally looking to move up. Do you really want to get in a bidding war, with another franchise for quarterback 3 or quarterback 4?
What are some of the things that you've, insights that you started to pick up in terms of roster construction, or that you've learned that are lessons learned, anything that you're able to share at least? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is interesting about roster construction, and first of all, everything that you're trying to acquire, all of the players are all human beings. And so there's a very deeply human aspect to it. But when you look at the behavior of a roster system, it acts very similarly to an inventory system. And so if you look at it from a systems design perspective, and what are your stocks? You have stocks of coaching talent, you have stocks of player talent, you have stocks of draft picks, you have flows where, you have the different actions coming in and out of that system. If you wait too long to acquire what you're going to need in the future, you end up with these really severe oscillations in overall team performance. And I think that's where we see, teams that were really bad become really good, but then they burn out really quickly because they're kind of chasing need. Whereas you see teams that are much more steady, both in the continuity within their front offices, like the Seahawks, but also, like the Ravens, where people just don't turn over very much, or if they do, it's because they're getting promoted into other staffs. And that continuity allows you to pursue a more long-term plan, smooth out some of the really high highs and some of the really low lows. If you can keep yourself in that competition window year after year after year, that's probably a better chance of getting a championship than going all in for 1 year. I mean, it worked for the Rams. They got all the way up there for 1 year, but I would say that that's much more the exception than the rule. We see that fail quite often, I think.
So
I've
go ahead, Evan.
No, go ahead, Jeff. I have a fun question that will
Okay.
send him into doomerism. So.
Okay, so I'll ask one more serious one. You just mentioned it. The Seahawks are in kind of a unique situation in this draft. You just hit it. I know analytically, I know a lot of the mindset is you should always be trading back. They don't have a second round pick. They made the Leonard Williams trade. They traded one of their third round picks away. But you mentioned this conundrum they're in, that they don't have a lot of blue chip players. So the Seahawks are at 16. What do you think they should do there? Do they shoot that blue chip player, or do they make the more analytical, logically approach?
I think it depends a lot on who's on the other side of the phone. One of the things that gets kind of lost in the public discourse is like, oh, you should always trade back. It's like, yeah, but it takes two to tango. And a lot of times, like, other teams are like, oh, I want to trade up, but I don't want to give you anything. If I'm the Seahawks, there's like the one thing I am absolutely not doing this draft is probably trading DK Metcalf unless I get a stupidly high offer, because he's probably the highest graded player on my entire team. Now, there's all sorts of contract implications with keeping Metcalf, but you also, don't have a quarterback that you're going to have to pay, Burrow / Mahomes money. So I don't think there's really a financial incentive to moving off from someone like Metcalf. And if you have a great veteran wide receiver, you want that in place before you get your rookie quarterback in the room. Having said all that, part of it is also like, where are the chips going to fall in the draft? If you're sitting there at 16, the chance that you get a really solid blue chip player. So like on our grade scale, we grade from 1 to 10 on players, and a blue chip is really a 7 or above. But when you talk about like a really firm one, it's really an 8. The chance that you're going to get an 8 to fall that low is pretty low. So yeah, I would just kind of look at how the board's falling. Like if you're sitting there at 16 and someone like Johnny Newton falls to you, then like you should probably take them, assuming that you're comfortable with his health situation. And we can get into the specifics on him if you all want. But if you're looking to trade back, I would say I would not take a guard at 16. If I have an offer to trade back, I trade back and then I take a guard. But if I'm wanting to take a defensive tackle, I take a defensive tackle at 16.
Brian, do you agree with that?
I mean, I don't know if as hard of a rule, but I do think, and this relates to a question I was going to ask Sean, but I definitely value the defensive tackle positional value over guard.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's in a vacuum. If you've got an 8, using Sean's grading system, if you've got an 8 guard and you've got a 7 defensive tackle, then I'm okay with the 8 guard, like going in the teens. I want you to be getting blue chip players. And as long as they're not blue chip players at super really not valuable positions, like running back, then I want them,
I just want to note, it wasn't the analytics guy that called out running backs. I actually wore a running back jersey to the podcast here. Like,
yes.
If you trade a 4th round pick for a running back, it's fine.
I'm analytics curious, like I cross over, but I'm not all the way there. Evan, what were you going to ask?
I was just going to ask who, Sean, let's say Seattle sticks and picks at 16. Who's your realistic sweetheart pick? Preferentially from your personal perspective.
Yeah. Just based on like who's, realistic chance that they actually fall.
Realistic chance they fall. You're in the GM seat. Who you pick?
I would love for them to take Johnny Newton. I think he is the best defensive tackle in the class. So I'll start off with that hot take. I think he's better than Byron Murphy. And, I know that there's some concerns about the fracture that he has in his foot, but if you look at the re-injury rates for that particular position and in that particular injury, guys who have the corrective surgery, the re-injury rate falls from 20% to 13%. And then the overall needing a second surgery rate is also at about 12%. So I understand being a little bit cautious about, him having a fracture in his foot, but I think the re-injury rate is lower than people worry about. Having said all that, I don't have access to a team doctor, right? So maybe the Seahawks got into this guy's medical file, were able to look at his x-rays. Maybe it's worse than you or I know about, in which case, that may dissuade you. But that's who I would love for them to take.
So I'm going to flip it. With the exception of drafting a running back, what realistic draft selection is going to send you into a panic and make you jump off a cliff?
Well, that's the difference between you and me, Evan. I don't look for the nearest cliff with every draft pick. If they take a punter in the first,
stop it!
I'll probably have a bit of a panic attack.
No, although you'd have a lot of analytics takes about the punter, right. Most likely.
I mean,
I have plenty of analytics takes about punters.
There's got to be something like a JJ McCarthy or something, or
Again, I think that would bother you a lot more than it would bother me.
You'd be comfortable with the Seahawks taking JJ McCarthy?
No, but I'm not going to jump off a cliff over it.
What about Cooper DeJean?
Have you seen the photo I've posted of Cooper DeJean?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. Hold up.
I like that Evan has claimed responsibility for a photo that is on the internet, as if he's somehow dug this up.
I'm gonna just share something with you right now, Sean. I'm gonna share it in the private chat. I want you to pull up this link, and I want you to tell me if this man is the second coming of Cam Chancellor.
Sean, I know you're friends with Evan, but I want to caution you. Anytime Evan sends you a link and says, open this up.
Right.
I think you should be very, very cautious. Definitely make sure there's no one else in the room.
No, so pull up that link in the private chat. Sean, tell me right now, off vibes. It should be on the right side of your screen if you're in the stream.
No, I already looked at it. And so I'm not worried about
that's your starting safety.
Because I don't think it fits within what they need as high priority at that pick. And if they take him in the second,
wait, wait, you answered a little differently. You don't think they're going to take him at 16, so that's why you're not worried about it.
Yeah.
But Evan's asking you, if they did take him at 16, how would you feel about it?
I would be really confused.
That's a great answer.
Is you have two glaring needs at interior offensive line and defensive line. Very good players on both sides of the ball, and you went with a player who probably won't make any impact on your roster. That would be a bizarre move.
Oh, now I'm nervous. How many Seahawks drafts have we come out? How many drafts have we come out and the response is, I'm confused.
Right.
Well, hold on.
John Schneider flashbacks.
Fair enough. But let's back it up for a second. Let's put kind of hands over the names, but let's talk about positional value. The Seahawks have need at tight end. Yeah. I think they have need at receiver. They have need at interior offensive line. They have need at interior defensive line.
Yep.
They have need at safety. You could argue they have need at edge, at least for top shelf edge players.
I mean, you can never have too many top shelf edge players, right?
Right.
You're never going to get Dallas Turner if somehow you get that, miracle.
I don't know how miraculous that would be if Byron Murphy ends up being the first defensive player off the board. I have the edges slipping in this draft, and so I'm curious. I would love it if that's not the case, but if the edges slip, that means the defensive tackles and the offensive tackles are going higher and the quarterbacks are going higher.
Yeah.
If the edges go, that means defensive tackles are slipping. Right. That means one or the other. So my question to you, Sean, was, let's just say defensive tackle, safety, tight end, interior offensive line, those 4, stack rank those in terms of value that you'd want to see your team address, not because of the specific team, but just in terms of how it matters for roster construction.
Sorry, you said safety, tight end, and what was the third?
Defensive tackle and interior offensive line.
Okay, I would go defensive tackle number 1, interior offensive line number 2, safety number 3, tight end number 4.
Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. I mean, there's Brock Bowers in this draft that a lot of people think is one of the only blue chippers. He's one of the 5 best players.
Tight end class.
Yeah, and yet I have questions about whether people are like, he's going to go in the top 10. I'm like, is he though? Like, I don't know. There's very bad data. Data says very bad things about first round tight ends.
Yes.
So
definitively, it's like rarely in football analytics is like something so glaringly true is like, don't burn that pick on a tight end.
Isn't it something like only one of the last 10 or 15 tight ends selected in the first round over the last something amount of years, only one has gotten a second contract from his drafting team?
It's something obscenely low like that. And we actually have an article that came out this morning on sumersports.com, shameless plug, talking about like exercised 5th-year option rates over expected.
Yeah.
And tight end is literally the worst position for that.
I'm not convinced tight end is like as much of a need as we think it is. I don't know.
They need one.
They need one.
Yeah,
like,
they need one.
It could be a 7th round pick, an
agree with
undrafted free agent.
But like Noah Fant and that guy from the Patriots that they signed, who's like a top blocker, like.
Yeah, you could play tomorrow with that.
We could get by with that, right?
Yeah,
like
I agree. That could be a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to do something. If we can grab you for just a few more minutes, Sean, and then we're going to let you go. I want to do a mock draft with this foursome. Okay.
Ooh, can I refill my beer real quick before we do this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, give me one.
Go ahead. That'll give me a chance. I'm gonna see if I can delete some of these ads because they always drive me nuts. Why don't you ask some questions, Jeff, while I get this prepped?
So, Sean, where are you on Jared Verse? That was the guy we were talking about before you came on.
If he's there at 16, that's a really good pick. So, like, I think Jared Verse is one of those guys where, is so overall much better in the pass game than he is in the run game. But when you look at his explosiveness, it really jumps off the page to me. Like that's where I think that he grades really highly. He's one of those guys where if he falls to 16, I would have a really hard time not taking him, even if it's not the top need for my team.
Yeah.
Okay. One more second. I'm almost there. Evan's back with his beer?
What's the most infuriating football take that Evan's ever sent you?
Oh God. I think the worst thing Evan has ever done for humanity was actually the Baby Yoda Russell Wilson thing.
Oh God. True.
I forgot about that. Do you guys remember
That's the worst.
We pissed off so many reporters.
That took off.
That was very confusing for a long time. All right, here we go.
We need to do that with Jason Myers.
That was a great answer. I forgot about that.
Okay. So are you able to see this, fellas?
Yeah, let me see if I
can. You mean to make it any bigger?
No, I got it.
Okay. So, Sean, we're not necessarily going to take your picks, but we're going to take your point of view. This is a learning exercise for Evan because Evan doesn't know the names of any of these players. These could all be fake names as far as he's concerned.
My vibe indicators is a strong evaluator.
Evan's going to be looking up their pictures, and that's how he's going to decide. I love that. That's my favorite Evan habits. So we've got Caleb Williams, Drake May. A little upset there. Marvin Harrison Jr. Forget the order here, but these guys are all gone.
Yeah. Good. JJ McCarthy's off the board, Evan.
McCarthy's off the board. Don't have to worry about him. Fautana is gone. You've got Talise Fuaga, Jared Verse. You've got your Johnny Newton, Byron Murphy, all these guys.
Robinson.
Yep, Chop Robinson. What would your knowledge tell you to do here for the Seahawks? Are they looking to trade back? Are they?
There's so much blue chip still on the board that I would look to go back a couple of spots.
How far back?
Let me see.
Your boy Johnny Appleseed's on the board.
Scroll down just a little bit on the available players. Probably no more than 5 spots.
All right, let's do this. I know what the trade is for Pittsburgh, so I'm going to move us down to Pittsburgh. 4 spots, right? Or yeah. That is 16 for 20 and 98, third rounder. And we'll throw in next year's first just to make sure that they accept the trade. Not really what part of it.
That would be rich in real life.
Oh, it'd be ridiculous. No, this is not the just without the first is actually a realistic trade, but let's just do that. So we've moved down 4. Now Brian Thomas is gone, Fuaga's gone, Jared Verse is gone.
Okay.
Here are the guys left. You still got your Johnny Newton and Byron Murphy. You got JC Latham, got Chop, got Graham Barton. What do you do now?
That is a good question. I would probably take Newton just because the need at tackle is higher. I think him and Chop Robinson are both about the same quality of player. I wouldn't take Latham there, I don't think.
Evan, do you have any
I'm going to go Johnny Newton there.
Do you have any positional preference? Like if the Seahawks nail one position in this draft with a great player, is there a specific position where you're just like, man, I just hope they come out of this draft better in this way?
It's got to be interior defensive line, closely followed by interior offensive line.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go Johnny Newton. And just so you know, Sean, this goes against my better judgment. I am not a Johnny Newton guy.
Okay.
I won't go in, like, you have all the numbers. So you know, people should listen to you. I think Johnny Newton is a 280-pound player who's put on 20 pounds and will win. He's like Quentin Jefferson plus.
That's an amazing thing.
No. It is
You just complimented him so hard.
It is a guy who will be effective with quickness. He will not make the Seahawks a tougher team. And Byron Murphy, I believe, is a much better NFL defensive tackle in his career trajectory. But we're going to stick with Johnny Newton.
The Q Jeff lore goes back far.
So we're going to let this go all the way through. We're not going to do any other trade ups or anything like that. And we're going to come all the way to 81.
All
right. So, Evan, if you don't know, the Seahawks don't have a second round pick.
No, I do know that.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, it's been a while, dude. You've been playing pickleball. I have no idea. Do you know what city the Seahawks play in?
Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So now we're here at 81. We've got our defensive tackle. We have not gotten our interior offensive line. We've not gotten linebacker, not gotten safety, edge. Where do you go here?
I hate how this draft has fallen on guards so far, to be honest with you. Let me see.
You want to see some guards? Can narrow it to guards. These are the guards that are currently available.
Oh, that's rough. Actually, I will give you. Okay. I'm going to give you a guard that I personally really like from the analytics side, but I think our scouts actually disagree with me here. We might actually be able to go one more round before we pick him, though.
Okay. All right. So then which way do you go?
Let's see here.
Do you consider wide receiver here, knowing how valuable that position can be and how good that that position is in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this draft is there's so much wide receiver talent that you still have some good options here. Like these are these are not bad players, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, Jalen McMillan is probably the guy there.
Is that what you want to do? You want to draft a receiver?
Yeah, let's go Jalen McMillan.
Okay. I lied. We're actually doing exactly what Sean wants because I'm curious how this ends up.
We have to at this point.
We get plausible deniability on the outcome of this draft. So now we're at pick 98 because we picked this up from Pittsburgh. So now we get 98 and 102. So we're going to be, two of the next, 4 picks, whatever it is.
Show me who's at guard again, real quick.
At guard, these are the guys available.
He's still there. All right, so go back to all. I'm going to take Devondre Sweat.
Hell yes!
Let's go.
Oh, you just gave Brian the biggest freaking boner.
Wait.
Oh my god!
Tell me why that's such a great pick, Sean. What about
because he fell this low because he got a DUI. He's a gamble, right? Like you're worried about off-field issues, but like he's an absolute monster, anchors the whole defense up front. I think if you can put him next to a speedster like Johnny Newton, like now you have a complementary defensive line.
Yeah,
I would like the Johnny Newton pick a lot more if I knew Devondre Sweat was the other part of it.
Yeah, all of a sudden you would have Leonard Williams, Johnny Newton, and Devondre Sweat.
Right. And like you're absolutely going to stuff the run game of your opponents, and 2 of your division opponents love the run game. So
the San Francisco 49ers do not have a great offensive line. They have a great offensive lineman.
Right.
They do not have a great offensive line. You put Johnny Newton, Devondre Sweat, and Leonard Williams on a line, and you put Mafe and Uchenna Nwosu on the outside. They're going to have trouble for the first time in years. They will have trouble running their offense consistently against the Seahawks.
And one of the things that you should be aware of about Johnny Newton, if you look at his production, like his context-based production in college, half of his production comes from the outside. He's an inside-out player.
Yep.
So, like, if you have a guy who is an anchor to the center, if you can get him past some of those issues, but again, we're at pick, 100 here.
Yep.
So you're not burning high draft capital on Sweat.
Does this Sweat guy have any other issues outside of the solo DUI?
Go on, Ben. Go ahead. Or Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
You just accused me of being Ben Baldwin.
I know. I was like, this is your real name, so I want to honor that.
Yeah, his weight has fluctuated a bit, so there's some concerns about is he not following a regimented diet?
He's trying to get a little thick for summer. Okay, let's have some grace. Okay, trying to fill out the short shorts. Okay, let's calm down.
Nobody fills them up like you on Instagram.
I forgot you do follow me on Instagram.
Oh my god,
that's funny as hell.
All right. So here we are, a few picks later. Now, are you wanting to see guards?
Yep. All right. I'm going to take Mason McCormick.
Yes.
South Dakota State.
Yes. So you analytics like him. You're saying scouts have more questions.
Yeah, I think there's some question marks based off of the level of competition he faced, and I think that's totally fair. But I mean, you look at his pressure allowed rate, you look at just how clean he was as a player, and even though he's coming out of a smaller school, he's the right size to play NFL guard. Like that's at this part in the draft. I think most guards take a year to develop anyway. Get him a year with an NFL coaching staff, see where he's at, and I think you're cooking by next year.
Great. So now you've got Johnny Newton, Jalen McMillan, Devondre Sweat, Mason McCormick. Where are you going next?
Oh my gosh, let's see.
You want to look edge? You want to look linebacker? You want?
No. Scroll up. I'm drafting the quarterback of the future, Michael Pratt.
No way. Talk a little bit about Michael Pratt. What do you like about Michael Pratt?
I think Michael Pratt is super undervalued in this draft class. He's one of the guys where you don't want him as your starter year one. But I think if you can give him some time to develop and learn the ropes, learn behind a pro's pro like Gino, then in a couple of years you could Jordan Love him. That's my take on him. And if it doesn't work out, again, we took him in like the 4th. And if all he is a backup quarterback, you took a backup quarterback in the 4th. You're not, beating yourself up over it.
Yeah.
And in general, like backup quarterback is the biggest insurance policy on your team, and people undervalue it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So here we are. We have 2 6th-round picks. This is the first of them, 179. Where do you go next?
Gosh, now I'm like having to look guys up. we are looking.
You haven't done linebacker yet. I can give you like linebacker and safety are 2 worth looking at. Maris Lufau is a guy that Jeff and I have talked about. A bit of a fan of his. Safety, Dominique Hampton's a guy that we've talked about quite a bit at this point in the draft. What else, Jeff? Edge.
Yeah, there's a couple flyers here. I would consider double downing at guard.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean, by the time you're in the 6th round, usually, because we didn't get to address guard early, it's not like the worst idea to just take a second guy, especially with the practice squad rules with stashing offensive linemen, that you can hide those guys for more time.
I think any of these 3 guys are interesting. We haven't talked about Javian Cohen as much. He's a big dude.
And I thought tight end, the blocking tight ends are still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Javian Coleman is just a big dude.
Yeah. What about LeMaya from Utah? Played a little bit of tackle, and then people profile him as a guard.
Let's see. Okay. Gosh, I would probably take. I don't love either one of these options, but
that's fine. There's also Christian Boyd. We already taken a lot of defensive linemen, so it probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Linebackers an option, tight end, edge. Yeah, I'm seeing guys that have made visits.
No, I mean we haven't addressed coverage at all. Coverage is one of those positions that I think that guys slip through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So I would not hate taking a safety here.
Okay.
Just because you can never.
Evan Williams has been mocked to the Seahawks in some places. Dominique Hampton as well. Either of those guys jump out to you?
Let's go ahead and take Evan Williams.
Okay. Done.
Yeah, an Evan tribute.
Yeah, absolutely. Second 6th-round pick. You want to take a linebacker? You want to take edge? Tight end?
We do need a tight end.
How about AJ Barner?
Sure, let's take AJ Barner. Why not?
Gonna help you out here down at the scraping the barrel part of the draft. Last pick, 235.
We need Jason Myers replacement.
That's right. You just said
a wise analytics person told me never to spend a draft pick on a kicker. Actually,
you should listen to that guy. He knows.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I would not take Cam Little.
Okay.
No, can we talk about something though? Seriously, for a second. So the Seahawks do need to open up a little bit of cap space before the start of the season, and the Jason Myers extension would do that.
Oh, come on, you bastard. We're not talking about that. Sean, last pick.
Let's double down on offensive line.
Okay.
Because we didn't do that last round.
Look at tackle 2. There might be Frank Crum. This guy, I've got to show you a picture of Frank Crum.
Let's take a look at all
this guy. NFL draft. Look at this beautiful dude.
Oh my God. His hair's amazing.
Oh my God.
Brian. Oh my God.
I didn't take the picture.
I take him over Cooper
Oh my
Jean.
God.
Okay, we're
That's
making
the
this pick.
offensive
Frank
lineman,
from
Jean.
Travis Glover was a visit, by the way. Let's take Travis Glover. He was a
He
visit.
visited
Okay.
the Seahawks.
If you,
Travis
No,
Glover,
not him.
not Frank Crum.
Oh.
No, they wouldn't let him over the state lines.
All right, I'm going to take Travis Glover on your behalf.
is
He made
Frank
it.
Crum allowed within 500 feet of an elementary school?
Yeah, he wasn't allowed in the VMAC.
Ouch. All right, so Jeff, tell me how does Sean do here?
I think you said it best. I feel so much better about Johnny Newton pairing him with Sweat. I love the idea of coming out of the draft with that defensive tackle group. I think that can transform the Seahawks. McMillan is a luxury pick, but I think it's a sneaky roster build for next year. Tyler Lockett is probably not going to be back next year. Evans talked about that a lot. So you're not going to get a lot of value out of that this year, but I think that's a sneaky move for the future. The Michael Pratt thing is really interesting. It's something we probably haven't talked about enough, Brian, in that range. He makes a ton of sense. My one concern, obviously, is the interior offensive line. We only hit it once, and it's with more of a project. I think I'd be a little nervous about that spot going into the season. But again, the Sweat Newton thing can dictate this whole draft. If those guys hit, that will change the Seahawks as much as any position group. So I really like it. I think I'm going to give it a good B. And I think it would be an A if we hit one more interior offensive line in there.
Yeah, for me, it's the linebacker that we're missing, and so maybe you get someone UDFA, who knows? But I think the first 4 picks to me have a chance to be A- draft. If just those work out as you hope they would, that's a potentially really, really good setup for the team. And I also like AJ Barner. I think that's not quite an ideal pick. Tip Ryman would be ideal, but I don't think he's going to go a little higher. If you can get an AJ Barner type of player in the 6th round, I think that's a great fit for tight end and the right place to spend on it. So yeah, I like this draft. I was nervous when we started with Johnny Newton. You know, all the analytics guys, the film guys, they like Johnny Newton. And I'm like, if he is your A player in this draft, I'm concerned. If he is complemented by a guy like Tavondre Sweat, then I am much less concerned. So, yeah.
I think one of the hard things for the Seahawks in this draft in particular is that like they've got to fix the interior line on both sides of the ball, and it's not a particularly good draft for either of those positions. Like that's really where it gets hard, because I wonder without trading back and getting a significant return, or trading away a player and getting a lot, like how you fix both of those positions. My roster building theory on why you go after defensive tackle rather than guards is I think that the guard market exploding in free agency this year was much more of a sign of the weakness at guard in this year's draft than a shift in the position at large. Starting quality guards are available almost every single year in free agency. But good defensive tackles never hit free agency. Same thing with like really good wide receivers. You want a really good wide receiver, you want AJ Brown, trade for him. You want DK, like if you're another team and you want DK Metcalf, pay up, because like you've got to pay just to pay him. And the same thing is true of defensive tackles.
How would
Evan?
you feel about a stick and pick? Michael Penix is on the board at number 16, Sean.
I think that would not make a lot of sense.
It would not make a lot of sense, even though you told me earlier at some point Seattle has to think towards the future because Geno's.
No, they absolutely do, but at 16, like
you don't think Penix is that guy?
I don't. Not at the NFL level. I think so. There's a couple of things that I really like about Penix. His pressure to sack ratio is elite. It's very, very good, and it is the one thing that is most sticky to a player, right? Like a guy has really good pressure to sack ratio in college, tends to have a really good pressure to sack ratio in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, for instance, was like, I want to say he was 23% pressure to sack ratio in college. He's 21% in the NFL. Like, it's virtually the same. And Penix is very good about that. I think, though, that Penix's accuracy worries me, and it worries me a lot. If I'm taking a quarterback at 16, I want him to start year one. I don't know if Penix is a start year one guy. If the Seahawks had a second round pick, I could maybe talk myself into it, depending on how the rest of the draft would kind of fallen. But at 16, I don't think so.
I'll tell you who I would like to see Penix go to. It's not a common mocked spot. I would love to see Penix go to Minnesota. I'd love to see him play with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. I'd love to see him play for that coach and that play caller. I think that would be, I mean, it's the ideal situation for any young quarterback to get in right now, but I've actually compared Penix early on to Teddy Bridgewater before Bridgewater was injured, and I think they've got some similar attributes, and it would be interesting to see him in Minnesota kind of rekindle that. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be a Seahawk. I don't think he's going to be a Seahawk, and I'm okay with that. I just don't want him to be a Ram and contest for a decade.
I think that's fair. I mean, all bets are off when someone from that coaching tree gets a hold of a quarterback, right? Then it's like, oh, look, Penix suddenly has no accuracy problems whatsoever and is still elite at avoiding pressure and just put up, 47 on the Seahawks.
I swear to God, man. I swear to God.
All right. Well, we've kept you for an hour.
Yeah.
We've got a few Patreon questions I want to get to. You guys are welcome to stick on. You're also
why don't we just keep Sean around for the Patreon questions?
Yeah, you're welcome to stick around, or you're welcome to drop. Up to you. All right. So
they're sometimes funny too.
Sometimes they're always funny.
We should ask for unhinged Patreon questions.
We should specifically ask for that. We got a couple like that. Let's go with. Okay, let's see if Anders asks, what position of need, defensive tackle, guard, safety, linebacker, do you think is most likely not to be addressed until rounds 6 to 7? Not including tight end because that's too obvious. So defensive tackle, guard, safety, linebacker, which is most likely to not be addressed before round 6 to 7? Jeff, do you have a point of view on that one?
I'll go with linebacker because it's a really thin year for off-ball linebackers. And if the draft doesn't fall to you a certain way or that certain shelf that falls off, there's really no point of taking one like in round 4 or round 5. You might as well wait till the end of the draft. And really, we got to remember this. It is a need now, but with both safety and linebacker, you could probably push that need out another year. So if the draft doesn't fall your way, you do have at safety of Jenkins and Love. At linebacker, you have Baker and Dodson. So if the draft doesn't fall to you, they can just address it in next year's draft. So it's not an urgent need. So I think linebacker is probably the best bet just because it's really thin after that second, third round. It falls off a cliff.
I think the same thing. I've talked about this probably too much, but I think linebacker and safety are almost the same position. I think the way I'll put it is I think in the Seahawks board, they have grouped linebackers and safeties together because what they need is they need hybrid defenders in the back 7 that can do number of things. And if that happens to be a safety, Cole Bishop, fine. If it happens to be a linebacker and Cedric Gray or whoever it is, fine. Junior Colson. But I think whatever they go earlier on one of those, I think they will potentially not draft or not draft till late the other one. So if they get a linebacker early, safety could definitely slip. If they get a safety early, linebacker, I think could definitely slip.
That kind of hybrid safety linebacker, almost like nickel safety, is something that's kind of on the rise in the NFL. I wonder how much coaching with Roquan Smith has influenced Coach McDonald with respect to linebackers, where he may view them as like, hey, if we can't get the guy, like, let's just wait.
Yeah. That is definitely, I think, the question I have as well. And so another question here related from Anders is there any position you think will be a bigger emphasis in the UDFA pool? My answer here is tight end. I've kind of in pencil mark Jack Westover to the Seahawks as a UDFA at University of Washington. Ryan Grubb, all that background. But I think there's a lot of potential like tight ends that aren't worth drafting, but you could get UDFA. I don't know if there's any other position group that jumps out for you guys. Quarterback, there's a couple quarterbacks that could fit into that. All right. Hawks fan Matt Mann asks, Brady Henderson mentioned in his chat with Brian that his sense of the Seahawks like but don't necessarily love Michael Penix, which indicates it's very unlikely they take him at 16. If they're somewhat lukewarm on Penix, do you think they'd feel any stronger about any of the other quarterbacks in this draft?
I'm sure they feel stronger about them, and they just don't have the draft capital to get them.
What's with this like Rattler smoke though? Can somebody explain this to me?
Jeff, you talk with Rob. I know Rob's a huge fan. You want to talk a little bit about Spencer Rattler?
So Spencer Rattler was a really big prospect coming into his previous school, where he actually had to switch schools because Caleb Williams came in. Like going into that draft year, he was like projected to be like the second overall pick, and he completely flopped, transferred schools, and then he's kind of come on late. But he's got like a really good arm, and like he throws a really nice ball, but he's got like a weird throwing motion. It's got like a bit of a twinge to it. But because his arm strength is so good and like there's so much pop coming out of his throws, some people think he's worth just a dice roll in the second or third round. But we just don't see a lot of success stories of that area of the draft. Second round quarterbacks are sort of like I talk about second round edge players. It's almost all busts. If you're either going in the first round or you're going where like Tom Brady or Brock Purdy did, like Russ is really unique. Yeah. That second round quarterback has been sort of that nightmare. So I don't see a lot of historical examples of where that's worked. And people with Rattler's story, it's a lot more failures like Christian Hackenberg or something that don't work out. So it's a real bet on tools, and that he did kind of turn around his college career, and people think John might like him, and they did bring him in. I just can't fit him into the draft well. I don't see how they work that in.
Evan, this is a guy that at some point people were talking about as a number 1 overall pick. And then one of the things that he was in some kind of documentary and did not come off well. Like really, really like just not a leader and just not a quality individual. And that I think is hurt him quite a bit. But talent wise, I think most people think he's quite talented.
I mean, the word on the street coming out of South Carolina is that, he did mature significantly after that documentary. So if you believe that he has grown as a leader, again, maybe worth a lottery ticket. But to your point, Jeff, like, if you're the Seahawks and you've traded down into the second, like that is a lot of risk to assume in the second. If you're in the fourth or fifth and he's still there, then I think you can justify it because it's a really high upside if it hits, and the cost is much lower.
Tyler asks, how mad will you guys be when they draft Cooper DeJean at 16? Evan, there's a question for you.
I'm FaceTiming Evan immediately.
Oh, you want to? You'll be live streamed on this YouTube channel. Just tune in like everybody else tomorrow night, Sean. When the Seahawks are on the clock, you want to turn off the TV and you want to turn on this YouTube channel.
I'll just tell you this YouTube channel, it's getting banned within like 30 minutes. I'm telling you right now, YouTube's dropping the ban hammer once they see the content I produce off that.
Yeah.
I think he's Corbin Smith's favorite player in the draft too. So that adds more to Evan's. I think that adds more to Evan's case. Can I ask Evan a question?
Yeah.
Hit me, Jeff.
Who do you want the most based on your extensive draft knowledge or your vibes? Who do you want the most at 16? Is it Penix or is it?
Oh, like for fun vibes or like for actual like roster building?
Mostly the first answer, but if that creeps into your second answer, good enough.
If Penix is there at 16, I think you really got to consider it. I really think you do. And a side benefit, the Geno groupie cult would lose their goddamn mind. And that Twitter reaction.
I'm part of the Geno cult.
You Geno groupies. Thankfully, I've never obsessed over a Seahawks franchise quarterback. So I know I don't have that reputation. But I think Penix would be a lot of fun. I really do believe that. Now I know there's holes across the roster, but or that tackle
Gino,
from UW.
unlike past Seahawks quarterback, Gino has paved the way for other black quarterbacks to succeed in the NFL.
You guys want to know something funny? I shouldn't be sharing this. Actually, I can't. I take. This
Oh,
back.
come on.
Never mind. I can't share it. I was told
God
in
dang it.
confidence. I shouldn't have even said anything. I take it back. Continue the conversation.
We were so close.
Okay. This is from Braxton. Says it's a fun one. We're going to decide that together. We know there are a lot of smoke screens being thrown out by teams to distract us from what they actually might do.
Oh, yeah.
But where there's smoke, there's fire. What is the Seahawks draft rumor you've heard that you think is true, and why do you think it's true?
I think that they are looking to trade up.
Shut the hell up, Sean. You actually think they are?
I think they're at least considering it. Not that they will try and get in a bidding war with Minnesota, but like let's say hypothetically the Patriots don't love any of these quarterbacks, right? And if it goes Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2, I think there's a real shot the Seahawks take a swing at Drake May.
Oh my god.
But I think it means losing DK Metcalf. Like, I don't know how you pull off that without losing DK Metcalf.
You can't get to 3 without him.
Right. Because even if you give up 16 and a future first, it's not enough.
No, because they'll match you.
Right.
I wouldn't do it for him, honestly.
I don't see how that's possible. Jeff, Evan, do you have any Seahawks rumors you think might be true? That was a strong answer, Sean. So thank you for kicking that off.
Well, I owed Evan at least one hot take, so that he's not, the single source here.
Yes.
I love that though, because everybody's assuming they'll trade back or stick and pick, but we don't know this coaching staff. We don't know, what John Schneider could do with them.
So Albert Breer tied them to Jared Verse, who's a guy I really like, and I see the fit. If you read Mike McDonald's quotes in the John Boyle story, he jumps off the page as a guy who just can kick your ass in the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Talking about Sean's scenario, the one that would worry me is JJ McCarthy. In terms of McDonald and Harbaugh been around him, and they talked about the guy who tilts the room, and apparently that's the biggest thing going for McCarthy is just his character, his personality. If Jay Harbaugh and McDonald kind of and if he gets by Minnesota,
bro, I swear to God,
it worries me, man. They could even trade up for him.
I swear to God.
I changed my answer from earlier, Evan. You asked me what would make me jump off a cliff. I'd be pretty close if they traded up for JJ McCarthy.
Is JJ McCarthy actually good at football, or do people just like him because he's thick, white, tall, handsome, is a Christian, and looks like he's from the Midwest?
I think a lot of it's
you
that.
Want to load that question up a little harder there, Evan?
Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong.
I think that's a lot of it, and I think that he played in a pro-style offense, and he he makes some great throws in certain situations. He's a good third down quarterback. I don't know. I'm trying to give you something. I have never been in on JJ McCarthy. You know that.
I'm just telling you.
I'm really worried about the fact that he can't throw to his left.
His left.
This gives me Trubisky vibes.
Bro, he can't throw to a full side of the field.
Well, it's just the thing that with him is anytime there's a trend in football or a story, there's always an overcorrection to it, like Brock Purdy. People are going to be chasing the next kind of, and stylistically, there's some similarities between Purdy and McCarthy. And the Shanahan guys apparently really like McCarthy. And Minnesota's been the one tied to him the whole time. And I think because of Purdy, his push up the board is crazy. When I watched him during the year, he looked like Chad Henne to me, who was a 3rd-round pick out of Michigan. I didn't see the tools there, People have just convinced themselves, and now all of a sudden in everyone's mind he's an auto. His over under in the draft is 5.5,
Right.
and a lot of people are hitting the under. So I think it's a complete overcorrection of Brock Purdy, and if you're chasing outliers, you're probably going to fail.
Unless JJ McCarthy comes with Kyle Shanahan, then I don't know what, and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams, and on and on. I'll just say this. I tweeted this out before this show. There's rumors about the Giants being enamored with him. If the Giants draft Daniel Jones, sign Daniel Jones to a $40 million a year extension, sign Drew Lock, and then trade up for JJ McCarthy, show me 4 consecutive quarterback decisions that are more damning of a personnel department than that. Like, ooh, that would be, better them than us. That's all I got to say.
Those guys would be out of work by 2025.
All right. Couple more. This says it's for me. This comes from Brendan. Any truth to the rumor that John prefers Blake Corum, the running back, in the 4th round over T'Vondre Sweat, a la Eskridge over Humphrey? Oh my God. That's such a perfect, I feel seen. So thank you, Brendan, because not only do that I hate the running back picks that we've been making as early as I've been making them in consecutive years, but I hate Blake Corum. I am not at all the fact that he is the JJ McCarthy of running backs in this draft. He ran in a tough offense and ran through it. He had a few good cuts. He is not sudden. He is not an NFL athlete from my estimation of what you're looking for in a running back. He is just a battering ram. He's the least interesting running back to me in this draft, and it's not even a good draft for running back. So you picked the perfect guy as who I do not want to see. I think I want to see him a little bit more maybe than JJ McCarthy, because JJ McCarthy would mean a lot of really bad things for a really long time if the Seahawks drafted him. All right. Okay. Caleb Epp asks, who is your one potential draft pick that could make an immediate impact on the Seahawks roster in their rookie season, maybe even push them into playoff contention?
They weren't that far off from playoff contention to begin with, so it doesn't have to.
What's the position that you think are player? Evan, you're going to go. What are you going to say?
But I was just going to respond to what Sean was saying. Is I think they've done major roster regression though across the board. So,
sure.
This team is.
You think that? I feel like they tread water. I don't see major regression. Damian Lewis.
To be fair, I think they were needed regressions though. It's the thing I've been saying all offseason. They needed to take 2 steps back to take a step forward. Safety, I think they're worse. Linebacker, I think they're worse.
I'm not
Tight
sure.
end, I think they're worse.
Tight end, they are.
As it stands today,
tight end, they're definitely worse. Yeah.
As it stands today, guard is probably worse. Right?
Oh no, it's definitely worse.
Yeah. So these are worse positions. Granted, it could change tomorrow, but
that's a debate I could have with you. I don't hold Damian Lewis in high regard. I'm not so convinced there's that much daylight between Damian Lewis and Laken Tomlinson.
Doesn't Laken Tomlinson really suck though?
He's pretty mediocre, but I got a news for you. So is Damian Lewis. I'm not sure that there's that much of a difference between Jordan Brooks and Jerome Baker in this defense.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I'm telling you, dude. It depends on what you value, but I'm not sure. So I don't know. I don't see it that way as much. But getting back to Caleb's question, what is one position that if they nailed a player, you think would elevate this team the most?
If they knock defensive tackle out of the park, I think it changes the complexion of the team.
100%.
If you can generate pressure up the inside, I think that it's possible to kind of be crafty and efficient with your defense if you have a strong anchor, and your anchor either has to be on the outside or on the inside. I don't think that they are in a position to get a premier edge. If Jared Verse falls to them, then maybe, if they get lucky, but I think it's more likely that they're going from the inside out. And then just based off of the teams that they play, and then also the strengths of the teams that they're going to have to face within the NFC, you've got to be able to stop the run up the middle. It's not going to help you with everything. It's not going to help you with the dump off passes to McCaffrey, but you got to start somewhere.
All right, this is gonna be the last question because it is already tomorrow. It's already draft day.
It's
for
draft
Jeff
day.
Simmons.
Yeah.
Happy
Let's
draft day
go.
to you, Jeff. This question is specifically for you from Colin Lundstrom.
Oh boy.
And he says, I need you to help me cope with the inevitable agonizing pick of Chop Robinson. What am I supposed to do when they make this pick?
So if you want to know the pros of Chop Robinson, analytically, his athleticism at his age and his production at his age, there's a ton of ceiling. He is a freak athlete as a pass rusher. His first step and his explosion is really unique in this draft. His production, there's a lot of numbers that are similar to what Micah Parsons was. Obviously, his production wasn't close to that, but Parsons didn't produce well at Penn State either. So if you're looking for someone, you're betting on traits. And with drafting, a lot of times you're not betting on production, you're betting on traits. And so his first step and his explosion off the edge is really unique. And he's a young player. He's got big upside. The thing I struggle with is just as a team and where the Seahawks are, to not take a more physical player to me is really hard. And Sean mentioned defensive tackle, interior tackle. So athletically and upside wise, there's a lot there with Chop Robinson, but you're making a bet there. You're making a projection. I'm struggling with him. I struggle with Latu, not as prospects, but for the Seahawks, because you guys just covered a defensive tackle. I think for the Seahawks to kind of make up that ground that you guys have talked about, they need to do the trenches, and it's going to be an issue. And if you take like a souped up Darrell Taylor, I don't know if that helps you enough. I think it's either got to be inside on the offensive line, inside on the defensive line. So coping wise, the athleticism, the speed, the projection, a lot to be excited about. I know Nathan is really high on him. I would struggle with that one. I'm not going to lie. I couldn't wrap my head around that.
Wait, you mentioned his age. Was that a concern or something?
I think at his age,
young.
Yeah.
He's young.
Okay, got it.
But he's small. His big knock is that he's small, and like that's not going to change.
He's small. He's not a good run defender.
Small as in like weight or height or both?
Weight.
Yeah.
To me, he should be out of consideration for them based on the context of their team and what Mike McDonald wants to build. I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, his ability to immediately generate pressure, like the instant the play starts, is phenomenal. But I agree with you, Jeff. Like I'm worried about like you can start as fast as you want if you can't generate enough power to push through NFL linemen, like then it's for nothing. And then I think if Latu hadn't had that neck injury, I think we're all singing a very different tune about him. Because if he didn't have that medical specter hanging over his head, like he is a potential blue chip, and you take him every time. But is what it is.
Folks, we've gone almost 2 hours. We have welcomed back Evan Hill. We have welcomed for the first time Sean Clement, VP of Football Analytics at Sumer Sports. And we have even gotten you all the way into draft day in Canada with Jeff Simmons. You will not see Jeff the next 2 days unless somehow we're able to figure out how to steal him at some point. But
are you guys doing a post-draft show tomorrow?
I mean, sure, I have no idea what's going to happen other than I'm going to be live from the moment of the draft starting until at least the Seahawks pick. I'll probably stick on after that, but I don't know. And Evan's going to be on with me for some portion of that. I can't say for sure which portion, but he's going to be on with me for some of that.
Okay, I have a very serious, important question.
Yes.
What time does the draft start tomorrow night?
5 o'clock Pacific.
5 o'clock Pacific. Okay, I'm putting
Yes.
this in my calendar.
Yes. So I just want to want to thank Sean for coming on and sharing his insights. That was really cool, really helpful to get, and good to get from a Seahawks fan, no less. And Evan at Evan Hill HB, absolutely make sure you're following him for Seahawks takes and for some food takes now and then. And Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. He will be tracking all the money moving around on bets. And if I get any insights from Jeff, I'll be sure to share them. For me, folks, you will see me tomorrow morning. And tomorrow morning, for the first time and the only time, I will share my full 7-round mock for the Seahawks. Not all teams, but I will tell you the 7 players that I think the Seahawks are going to pick. And I will give you some alternates at each pick that are possible. And then we're going to get into it at 5 o'clock with the live stream. We'll be here for each and every one of the Seahawks pick over the next 3 days. You don't want to be anywhere else. Every year, our draft coverage is my favorite thing that we do. And we got a pretty damn good track record of our reactions to picks being the right reactions. So I'll stand by that. It's on video. And you can find us there. Until then, please give the show a like, click subscribe, become a YouTube member. The link is in the chat. It's in the description of the video. And become a Patreon member at patreon.com/hawkblogger. We will see you all tomorrow morning. Till then, take care.